Wonderful people of Earth, welcome to another edition of Not a Journalist. My name is Brian Holidae, and I'm here with entrepreneur, writer, healer, I communicator, bringer of people together. Uh, I feel like you do so much. Actually, you know what? I saw your bio recently, and I'll read the bio then. But folks, Chelsea from higher.veda is here. She's been committed to healing families and individuals through different healing practices, including massage, Ayurveda, and poetry. Unpacking her Caribbean identity has lent extraordinarily to her vision of wellness and has led to a journey of breaking intergenerational trauma, both for herself and her community. Um, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's so funny that I read that when you wrote a piece in February, Black History Month. Like discussing so many amazing things: wellness, health, healing, intergenerational trauma, and stuff like that. And I had just myself in January spoken with a therapist on this podcast about trauma and intergenerational trauma, and it was never something I'd ever addressed or even thought of.
Okay.
Through that conversation, it was the first time that I ever thought of my mom coming to Canada as a potentially traumatic event, because at the time when my mom tells me the story, you know, her father had passed away. She was being brought to live with her mother. And in my head, I was just like, oh yeah, like, to me that seems fine. You're going to live with your mom. Your father's passed away. It's probably hard for you. Being with your mom is probably what you wanted. But then it's like, oh no, but you're also being torn from your home at 17. Everything you had known is completely changed. The person that you relied on is gone. And just that, I felt so ashamed that at 37, I'd never thought of that. And then reading your piece was beautiful because it also helped enlighten me more from the conversation I had in January, and then read your piece in February. And here we are in March. And I feel like I'm climbing the hill of addressing my own mental health for the first time in my life. And I have people like you and Dr. Han Ren to thank for that. So that really long-winded way was me saying thank you.
I feel humbled. I didn't expect that. I didn't even know that you had read the article.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, what's so interesting is writing that piece was healing for me as well. That was just a very interesting experience, writing it, from a perspective of an Indo-Caribbean for Black History Month, and sort of reshaping the Caribbean and Black identity.
Yeah.
So already going into it, I had so many like moments of having to unpack what I felt was right or wrong, messaging the editor, like 3 days in and being like, oh my God, I don't think I can write this. Like, I think it should be a Black Caribbean. And for her, a Black woman, reassuring me, this is what we're interested in. Reshaping this idea of Blackness, and not so much of race, not so much of ethnicity. So yeah, that was a beautiful experience.
And can I say one quick thing? The part where you address how you had been identified by some people as Afro-Caribbean and potentially as Black, and that sense that you felt that sometimes those around you even possibly family members felt that it's just like, well, why would you want to identify that way if you're not? And
Mhm.
the idea that, well, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, but it sounded like you were saying they didn't want you to because they were just like, don't do that. But I don't think you meant it as them saying, don't do that because how would I, don't do it because you're infringing on blackness. More like, don't do it because you're not, and don't
Right.
pretend, and
Yes.
don't identify that way. More of a negative than a positive, right?
Absolutely. It was
Okay,
definitely more
yeah.
negative.
I tried to
I
dance around that
remember
as diplomatically as possible.
Yeah, no, and that makes a big difference, right? They're not saying, "Hey, don't take up space where you don't belong," or,
Yeah, yeah.
they're saying, "Ew."
Yeah, yes, okay, that's yeah. I was trying to find
You
the nice,
know?
but yes, that is exactly it.
And for me, I was just like I remember being in elementary school and being like, "Listen, guys, there's only white or black kids at my school, and I'm going to identify with those ones, okay?
Yeah,
Like, th I don't get it, just my hair is different." I'm so
yeah.
confused. And it's like my hair being different was the epitome of who I was for a time in my life when I didn't really
Oh, you cut out for a second.
know that
Hopefully.
many. So
Oh, sorry.
because I'm half Trinidadian and half Sri Lankan, and I
Oh,
didn't
sorry.
know any Sri Lankans growing up.
Very quickly, you cut out after
Yeah.
you said, the part about your hair, and then it cut out, and then you jumped back in, and I heard Trinidadian, so I'm like, "Oh, wait, I feel
Oh,
like that was important."
yeah. I basically said my hair was almost like the epitome of my identity.
Yeah,
Because if my hair were different, I'd I'd be accepted as black.
of course. Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it was just so complex growing up because yes, there were some Indo-Caribbeans around me, but I was also half Sri Lankan.
mhm,
And I didn't meet any Sri Lankans until I was in high school.
yeah,
So it was very confusing. I wasn't just Caribbean either.
yeah,
Um, and I remember for a while just wanting to identify as black. I thought I'm a black girl and that's cool and
yeah,
I'm accepted that way, until it's like, but why is your hair like that? And I remember specifically my grandparents feeling like, telling my mom, you can't let her like think she's black.
yeah,
Make it clear that she's not. And again, not in an infringing way, but just like she better know
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, and I remember even getting scolded for like my friends putting cornrows in my hair or little twists
oh,
in my hair.
yeah,
Um, Anything that I did that threatened my grandparents' like
yeah,
idea of an Indian child and what I
yeah,
was supposed to look like.
yeah,
Um, Leaked through my parents. My parents are very open-minded and they've always been. I have siblings from my parents' two separate relationships as well. So
mhm,
one of my siblings is half Filipina and one is half Trinidadian black, like black Trini.
yeah,
So, that was equally perplexing. Like for
yeah,
both
your
me and
family dynamic.
my brother was like, am I Sri Lankan? And we're like, no, you're not Sri Lankan. And I was like, am I black? No, you're not black. So just really,
Oh,
really confusing. And what this article really helped me explore and helped explain for me was that there was no shame in identifying or being identified as black,
mhm, mhm,
um, so long as I'm transparent about my privilege and the space that I'm being offered.
yeah,
So at some point they had written up um, a little piece on what was coming out, and they said, written by Black collaborators or Black artists. And I asked the editor to please, say people of color or just say, you know, add in another verb like
yeah,
beautiful, amazing writers, collaborators. Mostly because, yes, I don't want to infringe on or take up space where um, I know systematically it's not necessarily that I don't belong, but
Hmm.
my space should be very conscious and transparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so comforting to hear this person say, "This is a Black space, and we're inviting you to have a voice here."
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that must be such a healing thing too, because growing up, like I'm a black kid. I grew up in Montreal. I grew up in Côte-des-Neiges, which is, very much one of the multicultural hubs of the city. I black, Trini, Guyanese, um, Saint Lucian, Filipinos, Sri Lankans, Indians,
yeah.
and we were all in school together. And the
Which
the
school
pop
did you go to?
I went to Wager High School in
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, and then, like, I had friends who went to Shad Academy, and then when Shad shut down, they ended up coming to Wager, and
Right.
it was kind of just this, and it was always unfortunate because even in a school where we were always mixed, and I remember thinking this, like, I ended up having a crush on this Trini girl, and I really liked her, and her brother was in my grade. She was in the grade below me, and we ended up being friends at one point. And at the time, I didn't like her that way. We were just friends. I always thought she was cool. She was wonderful. She's super interesting. She was great to talk to. She just had this great energy and vibe. And interacting with her was so easy. And we took the bus together every day. And there was that moment where we both realized we liked each other. And essentially, her brother was just like, "Don't talk to my sister." And not out of fear, but out of respect for the brother, because I thought he was cool, and I like one of my best friends was really close friends with him, so it's not like I thought he was gonna jump me because he didn't like that
Yeah.
I. Yeah, it wasn't that fear. It was more that the sense of like, unfortunately, that old fashioned mentality of like, I didn't get the blessing, so I shouldn't pursue this. Like,
Right.
I unfortunately lived in that mindset of like, I needed the male approval to pursue this
Right.
woman, which I regret. I think I should have very much spoken to her about it, as opposed to listening to her brother, then standing at the bus stop next to her, because we still literally went to school together every day, and then us talking. And I guess she had gotten spoken to too, because her attitude had already changed. And had we had the chance to
Mm,
discuss that, maybe we could have figured out, maybe this isn't the best. We're both really young. We make such good friends,
but
because
you
from
guys
that moment,
never talked about it.
no, we never spoke about it, and our friendship completely deteriorated. It fell completely to the
Oh,
wayside. We were never the same again. And I regretted that after so much, because I genuinely liked that person.
right.
They were a really fun, amazing person in my life that I genuinely enjoyed spending that time with, and it just completely gone to dust, and it sucked because I was just like, well, and you're a teenager, so you're trying to understand where you identify, and it was that weird divide of like, because I feel like if I had been Trini, it wouldn't have been an issue. I really
Right.
felt like it was because of my blackness that this was a concern. Like, no, we
Okay,
don't.
so she was Indo.
Yes,
Yeah,
Indo
Caribbean.
Caribbean. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
She was Indo Trini, and
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm Antiguan. Sorry, that's true. I should have explained, because that's fair. Because I mean, that's
Yeah.
the other thing. Growing up in my head, that's like, I Trinis were brown. I met the first my
Oh,
first,
most, yeah, a lot of
yeah,
us,
the
yeah.
first black
True.
Trini I met uh was my cousin's like friend, who was from Tobago, and was,
Ah, yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. So it's just like, oh yeah, you're not from Trinidad then. Like, and you have all these like really weird ideas about stuff like that when you're growing up in the, because the Caribbean community is like small, but you have big island, small island mentality, and you have these conversations about stuff like that. And for those of you who are watching this and don't know what I mean, because you might not be from the Caribbean, trust me, there's a whole ecosystem.
Complex.
And yes, it's very, very complex.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I wish that like some of the stuff that you're saying about being welcomed into that space, and and like your article where you address all the similarities and stuff like that, I wish to God when I was younger that I had that experience of um connecting with people in my community that way.
Right.
And by my community, I mean Caribbean community in
Yeah.
general, and
Yeah.
not the idea of like Antigua and Trinidad and
Yeah.
Jamaica and the Vinnies, and like just all of us are islands that are under the flag of the Caribbean, but don't act like it together and don't communicate or work
Right.
together in those conversations. So,
So like, yeah, it's so fascinating. We're all so similar.
mhm,
Um, and for me, the most important thing to acknowledge is our history. Our history is what all brought us, to this one place, to this
yeah,
one land. And then, I mean, just like the rest of the world, where there's any like brown skinned people in the world, the colonizers just divided us.
yes,
But to think that like it's taken so long to become conscious of that, and still, still we're there's many of us that are unconscious to it until they land upon an article or somebody who's talking about intergenerational trauma. The fact that we don't we don't raise our children, or I wasn't, my parents didn't raise us with this consciousness that like, hey, we were all uprooted at
yeah,
some and identity is very complex. I remember when I was young, people would constantly ask like, um, "Are you Paki? Are you
oh yeah,
Indian? Where
yeah,
are you from?" All this shit, and I was always like, don't call me a Paki. No, I'm not black. No, no, no. Like, just so defensive, but I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know who I am. And I remember like white people always saying like, "Oh my God, I don't know why you're getting offended. You clearly have identity issues." Like, yeah, bitch, I have identity issues, and it's because of you.
Yeah, you and your
You're my
ancestors brought
ancestor.
us over, and then you, as the children, constantly keep dividing us and keep trying to identify what type of immigrant that we've brought over are you. Why?
Yeah,
Do you have a log somewhere so you can figure out how much you once owned? Like, what's your reasoning for always trying
yeah,
to? Yes, yes,
yeah.
I
I mean,
100%.
just the other day here in Cote d'Ivoire,
Yeah.
I mean, most people here are Ivorian black, right?
Mhm.
But they've got a very French presence. They're still quite tied into their colonialism here.
Mm.
But we encountered a white Ivorian, and can you believe the first thing he asks me is, "Are you Indian?"
What?
Yeah, I don't even think he said, "Are you Indian?" He's like, "You're Indian, right?" I was like, leave it to the only white guy I've
Yeah,
met
yeah,
in the Ivory Coast. Ask me this question. And, I just looked over at Will and I was like, do you know this person? Because I'm not going to answer them. And
yeah.
Will is like, just ignore him. And I'm like, so where are
But
you from? I
this
said, I'm
wasn't
Canadian.
but this wasn't someone that you guys knew. It wasn't like a friend of a friend. It's
It was a friend of a friend
okay,
that
okay,
like Will kind of knew,
okay.
but he's like, you're,
Acquaintance. Like
yeah,
distant. That's
like
right. Okay.
distant acquaintance.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, he's like, so where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so where are you from? And he's like, oh, I'm from Cote d'Ivoire. And I was like, well, where are you really from?
Yeah. Okay.
And he's like, oh, I'm from Cote d'Ivoire. I'm like,
No, but
you're
like
like indigenous from here? Or
yeah,
he's like, well, I'm French. And I'm like, oh, okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. Wow.
How
That
long have you been here?
wow, it must be such a fun thing to be able to flip that. Uh
Yeah, yeah,
and like not because we want to, it's not that idea of getting back at people, but it's the idea of mostly like identifying how ridiculous it must sound, and hopefully
yeah,
by asking that question
exactly.
to that person, they'll think like, oh, why, that's such a weird thing. I said I'm from Cote d'Ivoire. Yeah, but where are you really from? Oh, why are you asking me where I'm really from? Oh, because I don't look like everyone else around
Exactly.
here.
And because you were just about to do that to me,
Yes. Yeah.
so let like I can, let me just show you what you were about to do. I refuse
Mhm.
to answer, but you're gonna be confused by me asking you this. Like it was very interesting.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Two things you mentioned. You're in Cote d'Ivoire. Last time I spoke to you, you were in Ghana. Tell
Yeah.
me the story of, first off, remember, at the time that we're recording this, for those of you, if you're listening to this way later down the road, this is during the pandemic. It is, 2021. We've been in a year of dealing with a global pandemic. Travel has been very difficult for some. Most people, a lot of the friends that I have just chosen not to. But in your case, you traveled. And another thing you mentioned Will, who I'll let you explain one, who Will is, and two, why'd you travel?
Okay, so let's start with Will because he's also why I traveled. Um, so Will is my partner,
Mm.
and he is half Ghanaian, half Ivorian.
Oh, cool.
So actually, I've been to Ghana and Ivory Coast before. This is now my second time
Oh, cool.
visiting. And so we got engaged over summer 2020.
Oh, okay.
And we were planning to get married 2021 summer. Um, but, seeing the way COVID is going, and we were just like, okay, if we wait for COVID to end, we're never going to get married. Um, and so we had discussed a little bit, would we get married during this time that I came down to visit? Is it for us personally, it didn't feel too soon, but would it be shocking for our parents?
Mm.
So I came down to Ghana in November, and I talked to my parents a little bit about the idea of a civil marriage out here, so that travel could be easier for both of us as well.
Mm. Okay.
Um, with COVID restrictions, it's really hard to get a visa today.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get your travel approved, especially if you're going like across oceans like that.
Yeah.
So that was when we assessed our relationship and where we wanted to be in the next several years, we found that one of the most important things was going to be having access to each other.
Mm.
Even thinking about growing a family, things like that, we need to be able to travel in and out very, very easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we explained that to my parents, and my parents, they were just like, they love Will.
Yeah.
Will had, our relationship started in Montreal, and so they've had the last several years to really get to know him well. I visited Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire the first time when we were still friends.
Okay. Cool.
So his parents had gotten to know me, but gotten to know me as a friend of Will's.
Yeah.
And then, years later, understood we were in a long-term relationship. We lived together, but all of our communication was, online or over the phone, things like that. So for me, my parents were like, go for it. If you have
Right.
the opportunity to get married and have people at your wedding and family and enjoy outdoors, go for it. We'll
Yeah.
join
Enjoy it.
you. We'll join you over Zoom.
Yeah. That's nice. That's beautiful.
It was really beautiful just to get their approval so easily.
Hmm.
I was I was really warmed. I was really like, wow, okay, so we have the go from my parents.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a bit of a slower process getting the approval from his parents. Um, there were a lot more formalities and family discussions, and I really understood their point of view as well. They needed to get to know me
Yeah.
in an intimate way,
Well, I
a
was
bit.
gonna say, yeah, because I mean, just the way you described it, the fact that your family got to know Will over a period of time, and his family knew you as a friend, and now it's just like, oh, it's not a friend, we're welcoming you as a soon to be a daughter into the family. So there's a lot of discussions around that. So I can imagine, and it's funny because it's not like something we think of, and mainly on the male side in marriage, right? Like it's kind of like
No,
men are supposed to ask for the handed marriage, again, traditional old fashioned mentalities.
yeah,
But then, male parents are kind of just like, yes, yes, get married, give us grandkids, do that. So it's
right,
nice to hear that there was a conversation about you and him joining as one and bringing these families together. Because I feel like that's
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
Very important. And I mean, the consciousness that our families brought to to this union was just unreal as well. You know, they saw the love, they saw the friendship that was there. And I think that's what made them feel secure out of everything. That
Hmm.
this wasn't just like, I want to get married and I want to have kids. It wasn't just like some idealistic
Yeah.
um, venture that we were on. It was really like, this is my best friend, and I just want to have access to this person for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Oh man. I
You
mean,
know,
anyone who's listening to this as a podcast, I gotta say, watch the video because your face lights up so much when you say my best friend. It's so beautiful. Like, because sometimes you hear people talk about your partner doesn't have to be your best friend. And that's fair, but I think it's nice when your partner is your best friend. That's one of the things my mom told me early on. Like, it's okay if your be friends with someone before you decide to be their partner, because like that feeling you get of knowing that this person gets you, connects with you, the way you guys laugh, the way you guys can communicate. Like arguments with your best friend are, you talk through things as opposed to just holding the resentments. And that's when you realize, like, oh, this is legit. This isn't just someone I'm dating where I'm gonna just stew and tell my best friends, my other friends about. Yeah, like, when
right.
with my partner, it's just like when things are stewing, we give each other a little bit of distance, but then we talk and we actually have conversations, and that,
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like that's an important thing.
definitely. And I can talk on another podcast about how I feel that I manifested this partner.
Oh, dope. Okay.
um, but I think one important thing was that I knew for myself I wanted a friendship
Mm,
before these sort of commitments. That was
yeah.
very important to me. And so coming into that relationship with that consciousness really helped us develop that. It was always friendship first.
Mhm, mhm.
And there were moments in our relationship where we actually took steps back from physical intimacy, from spending time together, and really just went back to our friendship.
Mm, cool. Okay.
Um, and so that was always, now we've met a different space in our relationship where there's no going back to just friendship.
Yeah.
Um, but while we were getting to know each other, we had several moments where we're like, let's not think about where this relationship is going. Let's just think about what does our friend need right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so there were some odd formalities that we had to go through with his family. They are, quite strict Christians, West African,
Mhm.
you know, practice of religion as well, which is, I've learned, very different from Christians in Montreal that I know.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Um, I would say, there's some similarities between, let's say, the way my grandparents practiced Christianity, Caribbean Christians.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so anyone who's watching who knows what a very strict Caribbean Christian mother or grandmother would be like, you're finding similarities between West African Christians here as well. So anything that has too much to do with spirituality and earth and nature is getting into like witchery,
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
right?
Yeah. I was gonna
So
say, because my grandmother, but my grandmother, Antiguan, very religious and like, I'm sure very quick to say like, oh, not that I've heard her vocalize comments about Rastafarians, but I've seen the look. Like, a West Indian like grandma, like if she's, it's just like, oh, like that kind of like little and the
like,
hum, and you're just like, okay, grandma. It's like, well, I mean, it's a practice. It's
like
a,
so when Will and I first met, he had like these tiny little dreads, and his dad found a photo of him when he had first cut his hair,
hmm.
and he was like, "Isn't this such a sweet, handsome looking boy?" And Will's hair is just growing out. He doesn't have dreads right
Yeah.
now; it's just growing out a bit, and he's like, compared to this,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's so handsome right now. What are you talking about? Like what?
Yeah.
And his dad was like, but look at this. This is a proper, sweet, handsome boy. And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, you're talking about his hair only, aren't you?
Yeah.
What is this wild hair? And I'm like, what is it? What does it mean anyways?
Cultural
Um,
traditionalisms, like it's just these ideas, and and not that I can comment on him because I don't know his father, but I do know in some other instances that is also Eurocentric in the sense of like keeping very structured and straight, and appearance is based on this, and these are very specific things we want to see in this specific way because they are considered
definitely.
the most acceptable way to
Yeah.
look. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because his parents are quite, his dad is an interpreter, his mom is a translator.
Oh,
And
cool.
so they travel a lot across Africa and Europe to do different jobs.
Hmm.
So they're quite open-minded, but in a Eurocentric way,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
Um, Not very open-minded about their own history.
Hmm.
And so okay, so let me go through some of the formalities we had to go through.
Interesting.
So
Yes.
we had to both have separate conversations with each of his parents about our faith, about our friendship, our ways of communication. However, they weren't inquiring what were we practicing, what was strong in our relationship, where were our weaknesses. They were actually imposing Jesus must be the foundation of your relationship. If not, your relationship will not succeed.
Mhm.
You must be covered by the blood of Jesus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That one was a bit hard for me to swallow. I was like, this sounds creepy.
Yeah. Well, essentially, it sounds like you were going through like you were converting almost a little bit, 'cause
Right.
you don't identify you're currently as Christian, do you?
No. So, I mean,
Yeah.
technically, we're Christian, but I
Yeah,
wouldn't identify that way. No.
yeah, same with me. I grew up Baptist, I'm Christian, but I don't identify as Christian. And
Yeah.
again, sorry, mom. I know you're probably watching this. And every time I say it, I hear her go, "Oh," but it's
Oh, like my
not
grandparents won't get to see this, so it's all good. My mom, I definitely owe my mom a lot for going against the grain and being curious, staying curious about her history. You know,
Yeah.
her grandparents were still Hindu.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, so it was just my grandparents who were like first generation. On my dad's side, there were many generations going back, but my dad decided to reject it all and be atheist. So
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
my mom was really the one that brought spirituality into my life, and
Oh, that's cool.
like there's so many different religions you can choose.
Mhm.
You can choose not necessarily religion, but you have to have faith.
Yeah.
That was
In something.
in something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, another one was that the woman should be the one who is the organizer and who structures our daily life, and the man should be the one who protects us. Um, so anything that has to do with protection, protecting the home, like making sure the locks are well are
Mhm.
well fixed, but also I should, when we go out, he should always be the one to speak to strangers first, things like that. And I mean, this was hilarious for me because it was just like a week prior to this conversation that um, some person, came up to us outside of an ATM when we had just pulled out money and told Will, um, "My guys want to rob you, but I'm here to save you. You just have to give me, a good amount of money." And
Oh,
he was like negotiating with Will, and I was like, "Listen, dude, you are not interested in robbing us if you're up for negotiation."
yeah.
And so I started to get a bit louder and a bit feistier, and I was
Yeah.
like, "I don't know why you're pulling up on us like this. Like, you don't want it. You're not serious. So just
Yeah.
go away."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and Will was like, don't raise your voice or don't
Yeah.
talk like that. You make it dangerous. And then this man says, little girl, you don't know me. I could protect you. I'm dangerous. I could protect you on these streets. And in my head, I'm like, protect me from you? Like,
You, yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say.
and he's like, you can go over there and buy me a knife and I'll cut myself with it. Like to show you how tough I am. And I was like,
Is that a thing?
ah,
Okay.
so you don't have a knife on you. And I
Person's
was
sake.
like, listen, that's when I got a bit physical, and I just like gave him a little tug, shrug. I don't know,
Yeah,
I pushed him a bit because he was very close to Will. He was eyeing Will's pocket. I was like, you don't have a weapon on you. You just revealed that to me.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, he once I pushed him, there was a bit more people who noticed what was happening, and started just chiming in a little bit, and
yeah.
he left. And we got into our car and we went home, and Will was kind of like, "What just happened?" And I was like, "People in these streets can't fuck with me. I don't.
Yeah,
They don't know who I am, you
yeah.
know." Unless you pull out your weapon
Yes,
and
and
you're
yeah,
about to harm me, I'll surrender. Take anything you need, whatever. It's all
yeah.
good. It's not worth my life. But
If you're gonna bark like a wolf but be a little chihuahua, then I'm gonna call you
like
out as a chihuahua. Like,
exactly.
yeah, I can see what's
Like,
going on. Yeah,
it's interesting because I definitely think growing up in the Caribbean community in NDG, you
yeah,
know, made me this way as well.
mm,
Um, and sometimes, here in West Africa, I'm seen as, a small foreign girl.
yeah,
And, even for Will, sometimes he's surprised that this personality just comes out of me. And I'm like, no,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not messing with me today, actually. And so a little bit of that personality also came out in my conversation with Will's parents in this
Okay.
private conversation. And at some point, they actually invited Will to come and sit with me because they realized it wasn't going so well with just me.
Okay.
And I don't regret anything, but there's definitely some things that I would never do again, like speak
Okay.
over his father, um,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
interrupt his father while he was speaking. They were basically trying to tell me what my place in this marriage should be, and
Yeah.
that there's certain places I can't speak. There's certain places, and I was just getting very offended.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, let me tell you that I come from a family where I'm allowed to speak, where I'm
Yeah.
allowed to have a voice, and that might be unique, even universally, for a woman to be able to sit down and tell her dad, I don't like the way you're speaking to me right now, and I'm going to choose to withdraw from this conversation without getting huge backlash."
Yeah. And if the rest of the world maybe approach things that way, it could be healthier instead of constantly trying to put daughters in their place or women
Right.
in place. You know, like
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm happy. I feel like it is important that they did have the conversation with you because you also got to know where they're coming from. But you also they I think it's really important that they saw where you're coming from. Like, I think there was definitely an appreciation for the fact that they're West African and this is their culture, but you also wanted to make it clear, like, I love your son. He's my best friend. He's my partner. And, we see each other as equals and not necessarily this approach of, because it's funny that you brought that up because when I was in school and I was in university, I did interpersonal communications, and one of the earlier chapters in the course addressed the private and the public, um, and the difference between private and public. Public was seen as male, and private was seen as female, and
Mm,
the conversation of how public was the man is the breadwinner who's outside protecting the home, like and then our professor even brought it down to, like, he's just like, and then let's strip all that away and bring it down to what it was originally, which is the caveman went and hunted, and the cave woman stayed in the cave and made sure the cave was ready and that this food was ready for when the caveman came back. And that
yeah.
is such an old mentality, but it's still something that, here we are 2020 and we're still seeing elements of that, and we need to
Right.
at the time it was like 2000 whatever when I was in university, but it was the conversation of like those are things that we might need to address and try and change. Like that class was us trying to see how we need to change those conversations. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, no, it was exactly that. It was very archaic mentality. That for me, it was also like what struck me the most, I remember leaving that conversation feeling very livid and feeling
Mm.
like maybe we shouldn't get married yet.
Mm.
Um, because I don't agree
Mm.
with their perspective, and I don't want to enter a marriage where there isn't family harmony. So
Mm.
maybe we should wait
Interesting.
a bit for them to get to know me a bit more and for me to get to know them a bit more. But after that conversation, I managed to have separate conversations with his mother,
Mm.
and he also and I'm really proud of him for doing that because it's not common that the youngest son in the family will contradict or have sort of controversial conversations with their parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember saying, it was insulting to me that his mother knew that I'm not Christian,
Hmm.
that if anything, I'm practicing more of Hindu or Buddhist sort of practice, and to say to me, um, her words were, all these natural nature things, that's all good. But Jesus has to be at the foundation of your relationship, or else it won't succeed.
Mm.
And to me, that was a curse.
Mm.
And I take words very seriously, and I also, you call on energy when you speak that way. And
Yeah.
she is a woman with a lot of power. She's a healer herself, despite her consciousness of it or not.
Hmm.
And so I just felt very much like, if we're going to be cursed accidentally,
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
afford, we can't afford to do this right now. And so actually, he confronted his parents, and he was like, he had told them before our engagement, actually, there will be no discussions of religion,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
because my future wife is non-practicing Christian. You
Yeah.
know, she has a lot of beautiful practices, and we can learn from that or not.
Hmm.
But if religion is going to be, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
A deal breaker? Like a
no, no, no. If yeah, not just a deal breaker, but if religion is going to be imposed
okay.
onto us, that's basically going to be the only issue in our relationship. And
Yeah.
so, you two, him saying to his parents, "You guys will be the result of our issues in our relationship. Do you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that?" And so he had to, he repeated that to his parents, and he asked his mother, it's okay to share your religion, share your perspectives, but also to respect hers.
Hmm.
Um, but most of all, don't say things like, I cover you in the blood of Jesus, because that's a bit daunting for somebody
Yeah.
who's not interested in anybody else's blood than
Yeah.
her own.
Especially because like we grew up in Christianity, so whether or not we practice, like you said, there's power to those words. Like this is a completely different and completely weird example, but the show Sabrina on Netflix, where
Right. Okay.
the witch and the religion is based in Lucifer being the
The
de-
deity or the
deity.
god.
Yeah.
Right.
When they say like praise, I don't even want to say it right now because just the words
No.
make like I get nervous. And watching the show, I remember, one of my co-hosts from Geektastic Cypher, him and I were saying like these play too much.
Right.
We kept saying, yo, y'all are playing too much. But at the same time, it's like it's just a show, but it's that energy. It's the idea that someone is creating a show and putting the energy of that focus into the world. And even if I'm not practicing, the show made me so nervous sometimes. So I
And
understand, like,
rituals, even if it's
yeah.
for TV,
Oh
like I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And they went deep. And that's the thing. Like, it's that idea of like these things have power. There are power to words, like you're saying, like that. So I can understand why, the idea of like, the blood of Christ, it's like, well, hold on. Because that's a commitment on my end. If I
exactly.
because the other thing is we know. So if she was to say to someone who has no concept of who Christ is, then it's just like you're just saying words. These words mean nothing to me, but we
Right.
know what those words mean, so that has a bigger weight to it. So, man,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and just side note, the way that I've been taught Christianity and the way the Bible has been translated to me is
Mm,
that actually God is who we praise. Jesus has not been asked to be prayed to like a god.
yeah.
Um, so even at that level, the way I understand Christianity, it's been deeply mistaken in so many ways
Mm,
where we're constantly, like in this room that I'm in, this is my father in law's office, they
mm.
have white Jesus everywhere.
Oh boy, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so it's also that unconsciousness of their practice that made me feel like, hold up,
yeah.
what am I getting myself into? Um, but thankfully and surprisingly, his mother and I ended up bonding on many moments. She
Mm,
asked me about the beads that I wear on my anklets and sorry, on my ankles and my
mhm.
waist. She talked about the fact that her mother wore waist beads and that
Cool.
this was part of their traditions. And I was like, actually, it's from West African traditions that I've adopted these waist beads
Oh
as well.
wow.
You
Yeah.
and the greatest moment we ever had actually was my mother-in-law was the editor on my article.
Oh wow.
Yes, it actually gives me goosebumps
Yeah,
saying that.
that's so beautiful. That man, that that's such a cool like this whole conversation. I've been like, oh, I was a little nervous sometimes too with how we were discussing because I was like, I hope they're not like upset when they watch this. But obviously, you've gone through everything with them, and the fact that because that piece that you wrote discusses all these things, and you talk about like the six element and like and all these things that I'm reading, and I'm just like and you're like addressing how the Santeria connects with Christianity and
Right.
Catholicism, and I'm like, wow, this is stuff that I've read and I've heard about, but it's so great to see you discussing it, and then to know that someone that you had this conversation with and these conversations with turn around and was the editor for this for you is so cool. Like it's such a beautiful bow on that story. Like that's so great.
Yeah, that was definitely, you know, like an everlasting moment. Like I know
Mm,
that we both will never forget. And she's amazing at editing because of her
mm,
job. And
yeah.
it was Will who was like, so not to get into it a lot, but there was some disappointments with the
Okay.
platform I was working with.
Okay.
Um, and they were ready to uh, why am I losing my words? Publish the article without any edits. I sent it in and they were like, "This is great. We'll publish it as is." And I was like, "Huh?
Oh, well, yeah. Is
No,
this even
it
gonna?
needs to
Yeah.
be edited. Even though
Yeah.
I edited it, there needs to be editing."
Yeah.
Um, and so there was a back and forth issues with that um, up until just today, actually, or yesterday.
Mhm.
So things, if you read it, there's some words that have changed again.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, but it was Will that suggested his mom, edit it, and I was terrified.
Yeah.
But it came down to the last minute, and I had no editor on this. And I approached her and I was like, "Mama Achwa, I have this article, and I'm really nervous for you to read it.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily all my beliefs, but it is part of who I am,
Yeah.
and I just really need an editor." And she's like, "Oh dear, don't worry. I'm still open-minded." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And she read it and she made it so beautiful. She added such moments of finesse in that article. Um,
Yeah.
but the most beautiful moment was the last paragraph. she looked at me, and we were sitting across each other, and she asked me to come next to her, and she held my hand, and she was like, "Can we read the last paragraph together?"
Oh.
And I was like, "Yes." She read it out loud, and I had tears in my eyes, her reading my own words, and even
Wow.
now I'm getting teary
Yeah.
just thinking about it. The way she read it was beautiful, and she just looked at me and she was like, "That is so deep." I
Wow.
was like, "Oh my god,
Dude, this yo,
thank you." And
yeah.
we sat down and she was like, "God knows no religion."
Mm.
Like, "Oh my god,
Uh,
thank you,
yeah,
thank
it yeah.
you." Still getting goosebumps as I'm talking about this. But bringing this all back to Will and I
Yes.
did end
This
up
this is
getting
so
married.
beautiful. Oh, yes, congratulations.
Yes. So we, after several conversations, and his parents, no matter what, they had given us their approval. They were like,
Yeah.
"We want to get to know you better." And I think basically the friction that had happened was because they felt that they had to get to know all of me all at once. And they
Mm.
were like, "So your religion and this and this and this." And I felt very overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
felt imposed on. And then things started to slow down. And I told them the most important thing for me was get to know Will and I.
Yeah.
I remember his mom saying things like, "Will is not very organized." And I was like, "He's worked on his organization a lot over
Mm.
the years."
Mm.
So maybe just observe us. And when they started to observe us, they were like, "Well," they see the friendship, and I think that was the most important thing beyond religion and everything else. They were like,
Yeah.
just keep this friendship strong and never be afraid to tell each other anything, even if it's about each other, even if it's the worst thing. Like, today I really thought you were ugly. Like, I mean, you know
Yeah.
maybe not physically, maybe your behavior,
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, or I didn't like the way you spoke to this one or myself, or just
Yeah.
anything. Never be afraid to, I want more freedom, or I want to do this, and I don't like that you're not interested, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So it was also comforting to hear his parents say, have that open communication, no matter what it's about.
Yeah.
And we basically, we went down to the courthouse, and it was so simple. They were just like, "Okay, show us your ID. Great. We have a date available next week."
Whoa.
And we were so excited. We were just like, "Yeah, let's do this next week." And then, all of our parents had met at that point. The Zoom meeting with our parents was like gorgeous. It was
Uh,
smiles all around. Everybody just loved each other. Can't wait to meet.
yeah.
So that was another moment that was like, yes,
Yeah, the
solidifying, confirming. We're ready. We're here. This is happening. Um, so despite all of our parents being really, giving their approval for this, they were like, "Wait, it's happening in a week?"
yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, that's really quick on their end too, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, when we think back, we're like, "Whoa, we just like sprung that on everybody."
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were in it. We were just like,
Yeah, you're in
"Yes,
the bliss. You wanted to watch. Yeah.
let's do this." We didn't care if we had outfits or not. We didn't care if we had vows or not. We didn't care if we had a venue or not. We were just like, sign the papers.
Yeah.
Let's start this journey. We're so ready. And his family really came through and set up a gorgeous wedding for us. We did it in his childhood backyard, which
Oh, cool.
is beautiful as is, has like huge, beautiful trees. It already had one of those like sort of those altars, like
Oh,
the
yeah, like the arcs,
flowers.
the,
Yeah,
like, or yeah, yeah.
so it already had one of those beautiful bushy arcs.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, They set up a cute little picnic table. It was very much my style. We got beautiful outfits made for, quite an affordable cost. So
Huh, all this in a week?
everything came together
Wow.
so amazingly. When I look back, every now and then there's like things that I'm like, "Ugh, my hair was weird. Like I dyed my hair really quickly, and this all turned really, really pink, which it wasn't supposed to. My makeup was not done. The photographer forgot to take photos of me. There's tons of photos of Will. There's not a lot of photos of me.
What?
Um, so every now and then, when my ego wants to, there's
Mm,
things that I can find to really feel like, oh, we did that in a rush, and that wasn't
yeah.
great. But when I look back at the photos of myself, I mean, I don't think I've ever smiled like that so
Oh my,
much in my
yeah.
life. I was like, this smile is so big, it's awkward. Like, there's a lot of photos in there where I was like, "Oh, so cute. This is not going public, though." Um, yeah, and when I think about the day as well, it was just like I never imagined, marriage being, a wedding or a union like this with a partner being so exuberant and so
Mm,
ecstatic.
yeah.
I know you had mentioned before, um, that there's people out there who's like, you don't need to necessarily marry your best friend.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think I spent a lot of my life in that, like, state of mind,
Mhm.
and, not in a resentful or angry way,
Yeah, it's just
but more of a practical way,
yeah, yeah.
like, as long as we can respect each other, as long as there's some sort of friendship, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily need to be my best friend.
Yeah,
And there can be a compartmentalization of my life, and that's okay.
yeah.
And, it wasn't until I met Will that I was like, huh, this could be a
Yeah,
lot more exciting.
yeah, yeah.
So,
That's
yes,
yeah.
we got
I
married January 21st, 2021.
oh, that's a nice number.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a nice number.
Thank you.
That story is beautiful. That sounds like such an amazing experience. Uh, I mean, I follow you on social media, so I've seen snippets of things here and there, but until you actually hear the whole story and have that discussion and understand what the voyage was to the ultimate goal of finding this bliss that works for you two, and knowing that you were always connecting and always growing together, and this experience just allowed you to grow even more, and that it connected the families and allowed the families to grow,
Mhm,
and just like I visualize like that, like you guys all coming together and this tree growing out of this thing. And that's like such a beautiful idea of like, because sometimes it feels like, you hear about people getting together and when you were telling the story, I was just like, oh, it sounds like you and the in laws have a tough time. But ultimately, that was all to a greater good, and I think that's great, and I think that's beautiful. Because
yeah,
I know some people that don't have the best relationships with their in-laws, and and sometimes it's hard because you're hoping that it can all be worked out, because the in-laws, whether or not the children have strong relationships with their parents, I feel like the in-laws in some way still are a factor, because they
absolutely.
help, they raise this person, and there
Yeah,
are elements of this person's personality and the way they see the world that comes from how they were raised.
yeah,
Will is who he is because of his parents and the society and the
yeah,
culture around him, but his parents were a major part of that. So it's
for
great
sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
no, definitely. And like I knew that, something that was important to me was having community and having support from both of our families.
Mm,
Um, and mostly that's because of my mental health journey and knowing that I didn't want to be in a vacuum with just my partner.
yeah.
That having good relationships with my in-laws was very important to me. And so that's why I also said, I'll never speak over my father-in-law again.
Hmm.
It wasn't worth it. It
Yeah.
wasn't worth, even if I was offended. Now that I know him and now that I understand also the speed at which they were trying to move things forward and get to know me. I
Yeah.
know now that I have this openness with my father-in-law, and actually after a conversation I can go back and I can say, Papa, I wasn't crazy about the fact that you said this. My voice is very important to me. What were you trying to say?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and what's beautiful is that he has even said that he's witnessed his son become a lot more straightforward
Mm.
and have bigger conversations since meeting me.
Yeah.
Um, so he appreciates the forwardness that I have as well. Um, Even
And
though
it,
sometimes it can take them aback a bit, they're like, you know what? At the end of the day, we talk about everything.
yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah. This whole trip sounds like it
And
was an
even, during one of our toasts at our marriage, I even said, I do things differently.
amazing.
But, I'm very loving and I'm here to listen and observe, but also know I do things differently.
Yeah.
I'm different.
Well, I mean, so not to put you on the spot, but are you planning to stay there? Are you guys you're married and you're living there with the pandemic? I mean, I know at one point you got sick yourself, so I can imagine that's a whole part of the process of like being in a space, being in a different space, be feeling ill, but at least knowing that you had that family there and that support, which I think was beautiful. Like now that I hear that story, because I remember seeing when you posted that you had COVID, being really concerned because in my head I was just like, oh God, she has it and she's not home. And I understand you're there with your partner, but it's also like that still sounds scary to not be where you grew up. I'm very much of the mindset of like I like the idea of my comforts, and being sick somewhere else sounds it intimidates me quite a bit. So what was that process like? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, being sick abroad is definitely overwhelming.
Mm,
Um, but I have to say his family made it very easy.
mm,
Um, they were so supportive. They sent us like care packages almost every day with
oh,
food. We didn't have to cook. So it felt similar to being home because I know at
mm,
home, whether it was my mother or some, other family members, they'd come and support me and drop off food if needed.
yeah,
So we had a lot of support. The only thing is I really miss the comfort of our home.
yeah,
Definitely. We in Montreal, we have a lot more space. We have a full apartment. We have two cats that I miss a lot.
yeah.
Um, and so in Ghana, we were living in what would you call that? Like almost bachelor sized condo, like
Okay,
it's all open concept. The
yeah,
bed is pretty much across the kitchen.
okay, yeah,
A beautiful, sweet place, great view and everything like that. I couldn't complain. But I didn't realize how suffocated I felt in that place until we came here to Cote d'Ivoire. And here we're staying with his father in his childhood home here,
okay.
uh, where we have a lot more space. We have our own rooms, and we have actually him and I take up two rooms, one for our clothes, one for us.
Yeah.
And it was his dad who decided that for us. He was like, "You guys have too many things. Just take a
Yeah.
second." So, and we also have an office, so we have a lot of space here, which is really nice.
Okay.
However, we also live with an in-law, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a different issue of space.
yeah,
Um, some of my practices, like my, my my dancing, my things like that have felt a bit like I don't do them as openly because I don't have a full house. I don't
yeah.
know if I can play this type of music loud or things like that. Um, so I definitely miss home,
Mm.
and I've extended my flight several times at this point.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be here for about 4 months. Now I'm going on about 5 months. But I do officially have a return date. I
Okay.
will be coming back April 17th.
Okay.
And one of the biggest reasons is because I just got approved for an internship that will start end of May, so I'm
Oh,
waiting
awesome.
for that. And it's heavy work that I need to prepare for. I'll be
Mm.
working with teen moms and their babies, and
Oh, awesome. Okay.
working on attachment. I think we talked a little bit about attachment and things like that in our
Yes.
last
Yes. Yeah. And
podcast. So,
the
yeah,
experience and teaching people about touching the baby and like that,
exactly.
how it, yeah. It like my partner works in the NICU and they do a lot of the kangaroo care.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
need to hook up with your partner and see
Oh
if we can
yeah.
do something.
Oh, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They talk about kangaroo care. It's like they do these projects every year where they do like kangaroo care marathons and they try and like
Oh,
reach specific
yeah,
goals to like help with the attachment with the babies and stuff like that and the healing like, you know, just when it's so interesting to hear you talk about that healing process and to hear her talk about it because it's definitely kind of that it like you can tell the Western society and the Western medicine got it from someone in the Eastern community, like that idea
definitely.
of us like, hey, just touching and holding heals. And it's
Yeah,
just like, oh, okay. Because like I hear stories about in the 70s, they figured out that this lamp does this for the baby. Like the babies in the windows were doing better than the babies on this side of the room. So they
right,
realized that this light
yeah,
light heals and they're like, oh, we need to start putting these lamps over these babies, it'll help. And it's just kind of that process. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting to think that some of these things that in Western society and Western culture, because even in your piece where you're talking about the four elements and how the elements they use the elements to try and figure out what the ailment was and the imbalances sometimes, uh
right.
and then it makes me think like, yeah, with the babies maybe the imbalance is not enough of light and heat energy and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, that's such a simple thing. And then to them to adapt it into Western medicine that way, it's like, oh, okay, these are the things and the steps that it takes. But very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So, but that's so good. Congratulations. That's so great about the job. I'm very excited for you.
Thank
Um,
Yeah, I'm excited as well, and it's also, based in NDG, so
cool.
coming back to my roots, which was really important to me, and
Mm,
struggled to get this approved for multiple reasons. My supervisor and I, had different perspectives for quite a while, but it feels good
mm,
to be here finally.
awesome.
Um, so yeah, I'm going to be coming home for that for sure. And Will is going to be staying out here.
Okay.
So currently, Canada is not approving any visas for
Mm,
anybody abroad to come into the country. So he cannot visit, and we don't know until when. But he
even if
is in.
you're married.
Yeah. So because we're married,
Mhm.
he basically is immediately going through the process of Canadian residency.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
I think once all the documents are together, he can get a visa.
Okay.
But that
Okay.
still will take several months, especially with
Yeah.
the speed of bureaucracy right now.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
are so slow.
Yeah.
We're also hoping that we're hoping that the vaccine rolled out is going to help because, like, here it's going really fast.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So, yeah, like, so many people that we know are vaccinated already.
Are you eligible to get vaccinated there? I probably not, right? I imagine as a
No, no,
visitor. Yeah.
it'd have to be local. And
Which is fair, you know.
honest, I want to wait as long as possible before getting this vaccine. I just,
Fair, fair. I mean, there's a lot of conversations about
yeah,
it, and the other thing is like there's multiple vaccines. Uh,
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
that's fair.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like a
so
lot of
yeah,
people have.
I'm not against it or
Yeah,
anything, and no judgment. But I personally want to wait as long as I can.
yeah,
Um, Will might have to take it before me because he's most likely going to be going to Montreal before I come back this way. So,
yeah.
um,
And
you
they're
know, we ideally wanted to have a celebration here also in Montreal as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Uh,
That's what I was gonna ask. When you were
but
talking about the pictures and you not looking exactly the way you wanted, I was just like, well, you're also gonna have the Montreal wedding, right? Like, there's got to be a Montreal party. I expect it. So
definitely there has to be.
yeah.
Most of our friends and all of my family is there.
Hmm.
So, and my dad had said, he approves, go ahead, get married, but we must have a wedding there as well,
Yeah.
because the most important thing for him is to walk his
Ah,
eldest daughter down the aisle. So
that's so cool.
we totally respect that, but it's all on pause because of
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, traveling is definitely different. I
Well, first off, in November, you going from Montreal to Ghana, and then the travel within Ghana and within Africa to get. Tell me,
right.
please. I'm fascinated by that.
Okay, so going from Montreal to Ghana, I had to take a PCR test. That's the one where they, do it with the cotton swab.
Mhm.
I had to do a test 72 hours before,
Okay.
uh, and it had to be negative. So I got that test. It was very like it was quite simple, straightforward. So many people say like it doesn't hurt. It hurt me. Just
Okay.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay, extremely uncomfortable, and my
Yeah.
nose burned for like hours after. So
My
maybe I'm
partner.
just sensitive,
No, my
but
partner said the same thing.
oh,
My
okay.
partner my partner did her test one time, because she's a nurse. There was 2 weeks in a row where they made them do testing because there was like someone had on their floor had gotten COVID. So they're just like, yeah, so they're just like, you guys have to test this week and you guys have to test next week. And both times she ended up with headaches afterwards. And yeah, so you're not the only one.
Yeah, so that was uncomfortable. Got to the airport. Everything was quite easy and
Hmm.
clean in the airports. I felt safer in the airport than I did at the grocery store, for example.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay.
Um, I chose to wear gloves while I was there, and I changed my
Mhm.
gloves every now and then.
Mhm.
I had several masks that I also changed. So once I got into the airplane, I changed my mask into a new one.
Okay.
Um, I also, they gave you hand sanitizer, they gave you antibacterial wipes before you ate, things like that. I traveled with like 70% alcohol, and I would like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
sprayed like my chair and stuff in the airplane, things like that. Then once you get to Ghana, you have to do another test.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and it costed 150 US
Oh,
dollars.
okay.
So, and the one in Montreal also costed $150 because you need a specific travel COVID
Oh,
test,
yeah.
and you can't just get a regular one at any clinic. So you have to get it.
Oh,
It's a
interesting.
private clinic that's approved by the public health.
Mhm.
Um,
Like Public
what?
Health Canada, and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then and then Ghana, I imagine similarly they have a health organization. Okay.
Exactly. So you have to do that test once you arrive. But interestingly, in this side of the world, they don't go up the nose; they go down the throat,
Oh,
um,
okay.
which is equally as intrusive. Like you feel like you're gonna vomit. They're like, say ah, and you're like, the entire time. Um, but it doesn't hurt as much afterwards.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
there's no burning, there's no headache. I find it better. I wish they
Okay.
would do that in Canada.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that was even an option.
Yeah. Hey, at least
Um,
you're not in, at one point in China, they were doing rectal, so 2 points, right?
oh,
Yeah. I don't know if yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to know then. It's fine. But yeah, so then I got that test that was negative. So, we still had to quarantine for 14 days
Okay.
upon arrival.
Okay.
But we actually went to go visit family 10 days after.
Oh, okay.
We felt pretty safe, and it was mostly because I felt that my journey was extremely safe.
Mm.
Uh, that the airports did a really good job at protecting us and keeping distance between everyone. Everyone had like a row all to themselves, things
Oh,
like
wow.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, traveling domestically, or not
Yeah, it
within West Africa,
yeah.
that was different. So you had to get the test 72 hours before,
Mhm.
uh, but you didn't, so in Ghana, you have to get the second test. In Ivory Coast, you don't have to.
Okay.
Once you land, you're free to go. Um, and which, what was uncomfortable was the flight was packed, and we
Oh,
were next to people.
oh,
And so that felt a bit unsafe. Will and I asked to change seats because there were a couple rows that were empty, yet they chose to pack us all in the back
oh.
instead of spreading us out. It was quite odd.
Hmm.
And so they allowed us to switch seats. They said we weren't allowed, but we did it, and then they didn't say anything. I remember, I remember, like, one of the flight attendants passing down the aisle, and Will was like, "Oh, maybe we should go back to our seats." And I was like, "Maybe you should be quiet." Like,
Oh,
and I was like, "There's no eye contact, Will. Don't give her eye contact."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she didn't say anything. She was like, "All good." Um, so that was okay. Now, coming back home,
Yeah,
that is going to be interesting. I've
yeah,
done a lot of research already. I'm not looking forward to this, that's for sure.
yeah,
So as usual, I have to get the test 72 hours before that
yeah.
says negative. Then I get to the airport in Abidjan, which is
Okay.
here in Cote d'Ivoire, and I've been told by Air France
Yeah.
that I have to have my quarantine hotel, which
But
is which is now mandatory in Quebec. I have to
yeah,
have that booked before getting on my flight in Abidjan.
yeah,
So I went and I looked at the prices, and it looks like it's a minimum of at least $1,000 that I'm going to spend.
yeah. And
One,
do you have to quarantine for 2 weeks in the hotel?
no. So you have to
Okay.
quarantine for 3 days while you wait for your second COVID test results.
Ah,
So when you
okay.
get to Montreal, then you have to get your second COVID test, then you go to the hotel and you wait for your results. Your
Okay.
results can come within 24 hours. And if they do come within 24 hours, you will not be refunded for the other 2 nights that you spent.
Oh,
It's a
that
whole package that you have to buy, and the
ah,
package is about 800 and something dollars on its own, and then
okay.
you have to pay the fees for the hotel.
Oh,
So here's what's interesting. My flight is on April 17th, right? I'll be
yeah.
landing April 18th. I'm not allowed to book my hotel right now. I have to wait until like a week before my flight, where
Okay.
hotel prices are going to go up, and then add the 800 and whatever
Oh,
cost.
wait, why do you have to wait? Do they explain? Nope. Okay.
No, because you're coming home and there's too many people coming home, so you can't book in advance.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I want to find. I like. I kind of want to try and find a loophole. I'm like, can someone else book it for you? And
No,
no.
if you
Yeah.
if you book it for like, basically, when you book it, there's special rates. You have to click on special rates, and there's something called GAA,
Okay.
and that is the government approved accommodation
Oh. Okay.
for your quarantine.
Yeah.
So all the hotels I've checked, you can book a normal room,
But not a
but
GA.
not a GAA. It's not available. The only time it's available that I can see is like a week in advance.
Yeah. Ah.
So, and a week in advance, the hotel prices go from like $75 a night to like $300 a night.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not.
Right?
That's yeah. That
So,
I I understand. Like I get why they're having people stay in the hotels. Things that you've mentioned that I don't agree with though. If I get my results in 24 hours, let me cancel my last 2 days. You don't.
right?
I don't need to stay there. You know I don't need to stay there. There's absolutely no reason to stay there. And you could make more money having a last minute room. Like I'm sure you could be like, well, we have this room. Or if anything, you have other people coming in who need GAA rooms. So if you let me leave after the 24 hours, but someone else needs to do their 3 days,
Oh,
well
but
then
they'll let you leave. You can
yeah,
leave. They
yeah, but
just
they're
won't
just
give
not
you
giving
the money back,
yeah.
right?
Oh, so they
So
keep
they'll
it
make
and then
all
they
the
still
money.
oh, that's no, that's ah man. See, stuff like that is why I think a lot of people are not happy with the system that they've put in place.
Yeah, that's absolutely why.
because I didn't know
Um,
any of this information, and I was definitely just like, I'm sorry guys, you have to pay for these rooms. And I do think that 3 days while you're waiting for the results is an unfortunate but fair request. But I definitely don't agree with keeping my money if I got my results 24 hours.
yeah.
And I don't agree with not letting me book in advance, because here we are, March 26th. You know when you're coming back. You should be able to book. Don't wait and force people to pay these exorbitant prices because you're looking to make extra money. That's really not fair.
So, I mean, like, for
Yeah.
me, 3 days, okay, I get it. Most people are getting the results on their second day, though, and normally it's 48 hours to get your test results, but it's mandatory that you book the third night. So that's something that annoys me. Of course, not getting refunded is there's that as well.
Fair.
But for me, en plus, it's like I live by myself. There is no way that you can prove a
Oh yeah.
hotel is safer than my home. The only other name on my lease is my
Yeah.
husband's name, and he's not in the country.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there should
Yeah.
be some chances, there should be some exceptions. I also feel like there should be exceptions for people with mental health challenges.
Yeah.
You're gonna have someone arrive here and send them to a hotel all by themselves where they can be in the comfort of their homes. The
Yeah.
GA charge, which is like 8 something, I think is also, way too high. And
Mm,
their the reasoning is that because there's security and because they're going to offer you food. Um,
okay.
I
But
don't understand why there needs to be security. Like, they shouldn't be policing our lives that way.
yeah,
Like, what's
I
the
was
security for? In case we run away? Like,
well, I was just
what?
gonna ask once, like, because people were skipping, like there were stories of people skipping when they came in, which was a
Right.
big issue at first. But so I understand why they're like, we have to make sure people go in. But once someone's inside, how are they keeping people? Like, do they actually have security to make sure people don't leave the floors? Because that seems really intense.
Yeah, so now there's actual security,
Mm.
like in the hotels themselves um, that have been appointed by the government.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's overwhelming.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds a little that sounds a lot of intense, not a little intense. Yeah.
um, but also now that's just unnecessary because now you have to have this app. You download the Arrive Can app, and that's
Okay.
where you have to put all your information, and you get a QR code so they can really keep track of you. So what's the
Okay.
point of paying extra for security?
Yeah.
Um, but so I am actually preparing to not go into the 3-day quarantine
Oh, okay.
and accept the fine and take the fine to court.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I've done a lot of research, and I feel like I have a really great case to
Yeah.
make, um, particularly because the court cannot prove that the hotel where travelers are coming in and out of regularly is safer than my own home where I
Yeah.
live by myself.
Yeah.
Um, Two, I left in November. I'm not somebody who left while there was these travel restrictions and decided to go anyways. When
Yeah.
I left, there was not travel restrictions,
Yeah.
and I come to be here with my family and my husband.
Yeah.
Um, so I also feel like that should be an exception. If you left last year and these restrictions were only happened in
Mhm.
February, why am I why am I having to go through that as well? I don't think
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah, no, yeah, there was another story. I was watching the news, CBC News, and there was a gentleman who went to India to take care of his father who was ill, and his father passed away. And then he left behind. Um, apologies. He left behind his wife who was pregnant. So he's been in India, and there was obviously tons of restrictions. He couldn't get back. Finally, he's able to get back. They put in the restrictions, the flight restrictions, just by the time he figured out his situation to get back. So just around the time when he was about to leave, and he
Um,
didn't, and he didn't really plan for this. He now has this thing with like, you know, the $1,000 for the hotel and all the things and paying for the special test and blah blah blah. And he was explaining, it's like I feel like I'm being punished for wanting to be there when my father passed away, and that hurt. Like hearing him say that was such a sad, hard thing. And so in cases like you're talking about, where you've been there since November, you went to be with your partner, who is now your husband. You're building a life together. It's not like you went on vacation. And you know, again, it's not. They're not doing it for the people who are like going to Punta Cana and all that stuff, who see it as punitive. Yeah, sorry, you guys who are going on vacations during a pandemic, who want to be on a beach, I understand why you see it as punitive, because you know you shouldn't be going to a resort. You see it as
Right.
punitive because you know the thing you're doing is something that everyone's saying, please don't do this. But
Yeah.
someone like you and someone like the gentleman who went to India for his father, those are not people who are being like. Again, we're not trying to punish, but you definitely shouldn't be seen in the same boat as the
Exactly.
people who, like, the people who understand it as a punishment. There's a reason you see it that way, because you knew you shouldn't be going to a resort. The people who are trying to get back to their families or come back to get their lives restarted in a really stressful time should be given some sort of leeway and some options. I don't think we should just blanket it across everyone. So I definitely understand, and I definitely agree. Brave of you. I mean, if you're planning to fight it, I think that's great. You know, again, you know, I think it's very important for people, the idea that you're going to be by yourself in your own space for the time you need is very different from people who are just like, I just want to skip it and then stay in a bedroom downstairs from my parents' house. No,
Right.
that's not the same thing. And I, you know, for those of you who are listening to this and see it as being on the same page, you're not on the same page. Understand very specifically, the Chelsea situation is very specific. It's different,
Mhm.
and there's a reason why that. I understand that. To the guy who wants to come back and be with his wife who's pregnant and possibly just had a kid, I'm not saying he needs to stay in a hotel, but he should be able to find some other alternative location he can stay where he doesn't have to pay $1,000 after losing his father and not being able to be with his pregnant wife who's about to deliver their child.
Yeah.
That sounds insanely punitive. You're punishing someone. Yeah.
And there has to be other options. Like, you know, even for myself, I haven't worked much out here.
Mm,
I mean, a lot of people in general are not working much just because
yeah.
of a lot of the COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
But being in another country, not having an established clientele here or anything,
Mm,
um, it's going to be very difficult for me to afford,
yeah.
you know, that minimum 1,000. Like, you know,
Yeah.
some people are spending up to 3,000 and not getting their money back as well. When I called one of the hotels, you can hear people yelling in the hotel. So,
Wow.
I mean, this is just chaos. Why are we doing this? There
Yeah.
has to be other options. So, yeah, I've done research as well on, you know, just looking at the Quarantine Act and looking
Mm,
at, you know, the Canadian Citizen Act, and it seems as though there are there are other things that I can bring to court as well. You know,
mhm.
just um, you know, as a human, I technically am allowed to refuse the vaccination. I'm allowed to refuse the test. I'm allowed,
Yeah.
like, so technically I'm supposed to be allowed to refuse those things.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the test when I land. I'm
Yeah.
not against. You know, I know some people are against taking the second COVID test. I'm
Oh,
like, look, if you want to know if I caught COVID during my travels, that's fair. You
yeah.
know, I'll take the second COVID test, but I'm not going to this hotel. I don't. I just personally don't feel safer there. I don't.
Yeah. That's
Um,
fair.
yeah, I want to be in my home. And then also, as a Canadian citizen, we are technically supposed to have the right to come back to our country,
Yes.
no questions asked.
Yeah,
Like,
it's funny that you say that, because I've been in a situation when I was crossing the border back into the States. One of my friends who was driving us was American. There was an issue. He was brought in, questioned. And then when he came back to the car, the border agents told us, as Canadian citizens, we do not have the right to refuse you entry into your own country. Unfortunately, your friend at this time will not be allowed to come back with you. Um,
Oh,
which was kind of crazy. So we ended up getting stuck at the border for a bit. We ended up getting home, but it was just the idea that like that was a moment of like I never heard that before, and I guess I never thought of it. Like you can't be denied entry into your country, and I was
yeah,
just like, wow, okay, cool.
yeah,
That's a nice feeling. So I agree that for you coming back home, they can't deny you entry. I
right,
know people want to take precautions to protect themselves. I understand COVID is a concern. It is. This is not taking lightly, but I think people really need to understand that there are different tiers, especially in the story you're telling about yourself. You left in November. You didn't have any plans for, needing like to financially prepare for your return is
right,
very different from someone I follow on social media who was down in Mexico for 3 weeks and then is upset when on the back end of their trip the restrictions got put into place and they ended up having to pay to stay somewhere else until they could figure out their flight. And they were complaining about like the place that they took the test took too long to get them the results in the 72 hours, so they weren't able to book their flight and all this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know why you were in Mexico. Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't understand. If it's something you wanted to do, okay, but I don't understand why you were in Mexico, and that's for you to feel comfortable with. But I understand why Canada is saying, like, we can't refuse you entry, but we can definitely say, did you need to travel right now? Versus, Chelsea, you went to be with your partner for 5 months. Yeah, come back. You can come back home. So,
right,
yeah.
yeah. So, I've seen also a few people just on social media who have been rejecting the hotel quarantine, and
Mm,
it seems fairly simple, that
mm,
you just have to be very, honest and calm that you know your rights.
yeah.
Because France was telling me, oh well, you're not going to be able to get onto your flight if you don't have your hotel booked in advance. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I,
True.
well, as a Canadian citizen, you actually can't reject me from my flight, and the Canadian government has not asked you to
Oh,
put.
to impose this. Yeah.
Yeah, like some airports, specifically like Côte d'Ivoire and France, who are affiliated with like the French,
Yeah.
colonies and things like that. Like this is a common flight, Abidjan to Paris, Paris to Montreal. So they're
Yeah.
all kind of working together. But I know for sure the Canadian government has not asked anybody to reject or
Turn away.
turn away any Canadian citizens. For sure, they're going to try to threaten me, and they're going to try to persuade me into downloading this app and
Yeah.
booking my hotel. And I'll just calmly respond with, I know that I'm going to get a fine when I land in Canada, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
getting a fine. I'm going to get punished. I know that. Let
Hmm.
me on my flight.
Yeah.
And apparently you can just go up to an agent and you say, I refuse the hotel quarantine, write me up my fine. They're
Yeah.
going to give you options whether you want to plead guilty or, appeal in court. And you just choose to appeal it in
Feel
court.
in court. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've also, talked to some of my family members, and they're all in agreement, and they're all there to support
Yeah.
me as
Because
well. And
that's the other thing. Like, as long as you also have the support, that's an important aspect of it. It
yeah,
can't just like because everything you're describing, uh, and the fact that you'd be going to your own home that you have by yourself sounds great. But if you don't have anyone to support you in that, that's also where it becomes kind of like a concern of like, whoa, how are you going to eat? What are you going to do? But that's where the foundation of family comes into play, or
it's
and family as in not just family, but like your community around you. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Chelsea, this conversation, thank you so much. I've had such a great time talking with you. We didn't even cover everything we wanted to talk about, but we covered so much, and it was so wonderful and so great and so enlightening. And I very much appreciate it. I really do.
Great talking to you. And I always feel like once I get on here, I'm like, okay, let's just talk for the whole day.
I know. And I look forward to you. You know what? I look forward to getting the vaccine. I look forward to us being able to do this in person because we've done 2 of these over StreamYard. And, you know, one of the things that I'm looking forward to is doing more of these, even if it's social distance. I have the mobile stuff and I'm really excited about trying to get more of these things done, you know, in person because I have a lot of fun. I have great conversation with you and I look forward to it. I look forward to doing more.
Thank you so much for having me. I love
Of course.
though we didn't cover everything, this was just such a rich conversation.
Yes. Yes. I mean that it's the natural conversation is always better than what you have planned. You know, that's one of the things. So thank
Definitely.
you so much. I wish you a safe return. Very, very much so. I
Thank
look forward to you coming back and continuing all the great work you did and do here in Montreal. And yeah, and I look forward to Will coming so I can
Yeah,
meet him in person. Yeah,
yes, yes,
that's gonna be
definitely.
great.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you so much. Take care. Bye.